Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. But we're not going to talk football today. This is our baseball show, and Take 5 with Steven Travers. And Steven, this is one of those guests that I imagine, like last week, you're going to have a smile on your face from ear to ear all along because these are friends of yours, colleagues of yours, but not only that, teammates in some of the most important and influential days of your sports life.
Well, there's no question. And today's guest is the great Bud Biancalana, famous Kansas City Royal player, and very much looking forward to this.
Yeah, me as well. Well, we'll get to Buddy in just a second. Before we do, I just want to say, if you want to take a bet on the upcoming NFL draft, Major League Baseball is in full swing. You've got NHL and NBA playoffs coming up. You've got horse racing, auto racing, you name it. You can do all of that with mybookie.ag. Use promotional code MM50 whenever you go online, and it's so simple. You go online, you establish an account, you fund the account, and next thing you know, from anywhere in the world, you could be in Northern California or Atlanta, Georgia, or anywhere in between, you can place a bet on an upcoming game that you would like to be involved with. So mybookie.ag is the place to go. Again, MM50 is the promotional code. We appreciate their being a part of today's show. All right, well, Roland Amerigo Bianca, come on now. You couldn't be more Italian than what you are right there, but you end up with Buddy. I love it. Now, was there a specific portion of that for you, Buddy, where it was a family nickname or an older or younger brother, a sister, a neighbor? So tell us a little bit more about you.
I am a junior. My father was Roland Sr., and when he was in grade school in San Francisco, they referred to him as Roly Poly, and he did not want me to go through life, or at least my grade school years, of being called Roly Poly. So he quickly named me Bud, which people in California still call me Bud. My friends, as you notice, Steve calls me Bud. But it was only when I got to Kansas City that somehow I acquired Buddy. And so that's kind of what I go by now.
So everyone has a nickname at the major league level, and instead of Bud, it's Buddy or Mick or Mickey. All the I get that. That's awesome. So it wasn't until later on, but he called you Bud? But when you were playing early baseball, was it Roland?
No, it was always Bud. I was always known as Bud from the time I heard my name. It was Bud. I didn't hear Roland. So.
Well, and you made great friends here with Steven. And Steven, obviously, this is a guy that's had great influence on you. You've talked about him on numerous shows previously. And again, we're so glad that he wanted to be a part of today's show and take some time out of his busy schedule.
Yes, thank you, Harper, and welcome, Buddy. Thank you very much for being a guest.
Steve, you just called me Buddy for the first time, I think, in many decades. That's great. Thank you.
I know I haven't called you Roland, but we're going to talk about Roland because he was a friend of mine. But let me also, it occurs to me as we were talking about your youth, your mother is from Bluefield, West Virginia, and that is the home of the Bluefield Orioles, where I pitched several games in the minor leagues. So I know where she is from, and I know that your dad was from San Francisco, and you're a San Franciscan in that respect, but you also have some of that West Virginia in you as well.
Yeah, I do. The hills of West Virginia, I sure do. And I remember Bluefield. When I was at Tampa Bay, I traveled into Bluefield. I was the infield coordinator for the Rays and watched many games in that ballpark. Yeah.
Okay. All right, now here's where I want to start. We're going to start chronologically, and it's the summer after my freshman year at Redwood High School. Redwood High School already is a national high school baseball powerhouse, coached by a legendary coach named Al Endress, who was extremely influential in all of our lives, and just made baseball players, young baseball players, far better than they otherwise would have been. And he asked my dad, Don Travers, to be the manager of their summer league team called the Italian Athletic Club in a league called the Joe DiMaggio League. And this was basically the same as American Legion, 16 to 18 played. They played an 18-game schedule, but my dad saw to it that it was really a travel league. And it was more like, by the time you got to the state tournament, it's more like a 50 or 55 game schedule. And it's a big reason why those particular years were the best years Redwood ever had, because we had a full summer program, a full fall program. What Coach Andrus would do every year is he would identify some kid who was in the local Babe Ruth League, and he would call up who was ever managing the Joe DiMaggio, and he would say, there's a kid. And he calls up my father, and he said, there's a kid in the 8th grade. His name is Buddy Biancalana, and he's going to be the best shortstop that ever played at Redwood. I want you to work him out and have him play a game or two just to see what he looks like. And my first reaction was, that's an interesting name, Bud Biancalana. And second, really the best shortstop Redwood ever had, because there had been a kid named Ken Johnson who'd been a 2nd or 3rd round pick of the New York Yankees. And at that very time, we had a kid named Gary Latore, who was nothing less than mythic in terms of his athletic abilities. He would later become the most valuable player in the New York Penn League with the Red Sox. And Wade Boggs would once say he was the best player he ever played. So young Mr. Biancalana, according to Al Endress, who knew his stuff, is even better than those guys. So the next year is my sophomore year, and it's Buddy's freshman year, and we both get called up to the varsity at the same time. So this is when our friendship and our being teammates begins. And we are teammates for 3 years. And as far as that team is concerned, it was an unbelievable team. We're looking at the my senior year team in this photo here.
Hey, Steven, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. How come nobody's looking at the camera? They're all looking at the blondes and the brunettes down in the front. Can you explain that for me?
They were some nice looking girls, as a matter of fact. That was one of Coach Andrus's ideas. Rod Dato did the same thing at USC. He had bat girls, attractive girls who was, it was fun. They were nice girls. They hung out with us and were a part of the team, and a lot of them have been at events that we've had over the years and have remained friends. But anyway, Coach Andrus was named National Coach of the Year my junior year. My senior year, we won the North Coast section, and we were literally mythical national champions of high school baseball by Collegiate Baseball Magazine and the Eastern Bat Company. The end of the decade in 1979, the Bible of Baseball, the Sporting News, named us the National Program of the Decade for the entire 1970s. So obviously we had some very good players. We had a lot of stars. We had a lot of guys who went to places like Cal, USC, Pepperdine, Hawaii, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Nevada. I mean, and a lot of players went into professional baseball. Out of all those players, the most accoladed was Bud. He was as accoladed a high school athlete as you can get in terms of All-American, All-State, anything you could imagine. That's what he was. And of course, every college wanted him. And he came from a family that stressed education, and he was headed towards, a USC or Arizona State or Texas, really anywhere he wanted to go. But he was the #1 pick of the Kansas City Royals after his senior year, in which that team, we'd been #1 the previous year. That team was #2 in the nation that season. That's how, it just went on and on. And Buddy went into the professional ranks, and we'll talk to him at length about that. Reached the majors in '82, was the star of the 1985 World Series with Kansas City, became a celebrity of some note when he was on the David Letterman show, and became really an icon in Kansas City, to the point I saw a photo of the actor Paul Rudd entering a World Series game in 2016 with the #1 Bud Biancalana jersey, which is still sold in Kansas City. One of the reasons he's still there is because he's a big name in Kansas City. And now he has this fabulous zone training, which we're going to talk about. So that's what and now then I also wanted to say this, and this is very important to me. Our parents became good friends, and Mr. Biancalana was a financial advisor. He became our family's financial advisor. And in 1984, I was working on Wall Street, and I saw an advertisement that Charles Schwab had opened up a new division that had been created because of Reagan had deregulated a lot of the economy. And these were new jobs that didn't exist before. And I wanted this job, and I called Mr. Biancalana, and he went to bat for me. So I find myself working like 2 blocks away from Mr. Biancalana. And I would say for 2 years, at least once a month, I went to lunch with Buddy's dad. And he would take me to these magnificent North Beach Italian restaurants. And the maitre d's all knew him, and he knew all of them by name, and introduced me as his protege. And it was, and I can literally say, Bud, during this period of time, your dad was at least as much a friend of mine as you are, as you were and are. And I had such a soft spot in my heart for Roland Biancalana Sr., and
thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Family friend. So I wanted to say that, but that's my introduction of Buddy. And Harper, why don't we move it on to you, and then we'll get into a more free-flowing discussion of Bud's career and zone training and all the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Buddy, when you first started noticing that shortstop was the position for you, was this in Little League ball? No third base? Did you pitch? Did you catch? Tell me a little bit more about where you found your spot there.
Yeah, sure. So I did pitch as well. But between pitching and shortstop, that's where I primarily played until, I got to the big leagues. I played a few games at second base, a couple at third. But that was it, really, at shortstop. My glove was pretty good. My arm was good, and I ran well. I didn't hit. But they figured they'd teach me to hit. They never did. And really, as we, learn more about the zone and all kinds of mechanics, hitters today really know how to hit. They understand the physics of hitting. We just didn't. I can tell you, I played with a great hitter in George Brett. He didn't know how to hit, though. He was just a great hitter. Yeah. And nowadays, you can't just be a great hitter. You have to really understand how the whole system works. When I say the system, our physiology, you have to understand the physics of the mechanics. Then you can be a good hitter. So, but shortstop was really my spot.
Did you swing a 27-ounce wooden Hillerich and Bradbury bat? Do you remember or were you an Adirondack guy?
You know what? I should have swung a 27-inch Louisville Slugger or 27-ounce Louisville Slugger in the major leagues. I got in pro ball, and they gave me this big bat. It was I can't remember the model number, but it didn't have a traditional handle on it, but a very thick barrel. And they wanted me to hit the ball on the ground and run. Well, yeah. Do you see any guys trying to hit the ball on the ground these days and run? It's not if you try and hit a ball on the ground, you're losing the energy. You're losing the physics of the wrist. You're losing control of the bat head.
They want you to be a slapper. Is that right? Like a slapper in softball?
Slapper in softball. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
But, Barry Bonds swung one of the lightest bats in the league, and how'd that work for him?
Right. Yeah. No, they put a 32-ounce bat in my hand and said, "Here, hit it on the ground and go."
Wow. So, well, when did you play other sports? Were you a basketball and football guy too?
I as a youth, I played basketball, and then I hurt my back in football. I played 1 year. I played flag football in junior high, and then played freshman football at Redwood High School in California, and hurt my back in football. And I missed a season of basketball. And when I went back to play basketball, I was just never the same player, and so just stuck to baseball. I'd had a lot of concussions as a child that really impacted my my capability of breathing, and so basketball was very, very difficult for me. Although I played it okay. So baseball, a kind of a slower paced sport, was better suited for me, with kind of having trouble breathing because of concussions that I didn't realize I had, and just injuries, neck injuries, etc.
Did that end up being a high school, college, or college age, or early major league issue for you as well? Did you have any reoccurrences of that type of a head trauma injury or a problem?
What's interesting about head trauma? Well, I fell off a bathroom counter when I was a baby. I didn't know that until I was about 35 years old, until my sister said, you fell off a bathroom counter when a babysitter was babysitting you. And I went, whoa, no kidding. That's why a lot of my childhood pictures, my head is tilted.
Really?
So, and the thing about a head injury is, especially at a young age, when you don't know it happened, the blood vessels start to constricting, as you get older, and maybe some stress starts to, occur in life, which can certainly happen in life, right? And then you just don't realize what's going on. So that happened to me, and it was quite a journey to get really healthy. And I certainly wasn't healthy when I was playing professional ball. I just somehow survived. I somehow survived.
Wow.
But it was very challenging. But it was that challenge of trying to get my health and having to learn about why I wasn't feeling good and trying a ton of things to feel good that I kind of led me to what I do now. So
And I could have a lot of fun with that. You landed on your head. Yeah. And that's how you got to be so big, other things like that. But in a serious manner, did that affect your reading, writing, your arithmetic and schoolwork or anything like that? Did you have a hard time remembering things?
Yeah, comprehension was very difficult. Arithmetic was challenging. Math was good until a certain degree, until algebra, right?
Right. Yeah.
No, it absolutely affected my you too, huh? Absolutely
Welcome to
affected
the
my
club, right, buddy?
learning.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely affected my learning. But
Who are some of your childhood big leaguers? Could you remember everybody with the Giants and the A's? Steven still does. He can tell you everybody that was on that 72 A's roster, and that was, whatever. Were those the guys that you, or was there another team? Was it Cincinnati, Baltimore? Who were your early childhood heroes, and where did they come from?
yeah, well, very early on was the Giants. Grew up watching Willie Mays play and Bobby Bonds and Gary Maddox and Willie McCovey. So great memories of being at Candlestick freezing and watching them play, and hot dog wrappers, blowing up against the fence. It was really, really so cold. In fact, as a player, I got traded to Houston in '87 and played back in Candlestick in August and September of '87. I think it was the August trip of going to Candlestick. It was crazy. It was like playing in Cleveland in April with the wind whipping off Lake Erie. It was that cold. I was like, how can it be that cold in San Francisco in August? But it can be. And it was. So but yeah, so I was also an A's fan because the A's, I know Steve was a big A's fan. In fact, we've been to some A's games together. I went to the World Series games in '72, '73, and '74, and they were a fun bunch. Reggie and Gene Tennis and Joe Rudy and Sal Bando and Campy Campaneris and Dick Green and Ken Holtzman and Catfish Hunter and Vida Blue, I think, was maybe a little bit
years. Blue Moon Odom, I think, was a part of that too. I mean, goodness gracious, what an amazing time for baseball in the Bay Area. You mentioned Willie Mays and Willie McCovey, Bonds, etc. When you went to either the A's or the Giants games early on, was there ever that dream every kid has? What was it like for you going, man, I would love to be out on the field playing in front of these guys wearing their uniform?
Yeah, I knew like at 5 years old that, I wanted to play Major League Baseball.
Wow.
And so, when I went to those games, I think I was just I didn't know if I could or couldn't. I was just kind of I just watched the games, and was a big fan. I was a big fan. And, it was, I think my sophomore year in high school is when I realized, I might have a chance. I think some scouts started giving me some, some cards to fill out.
Okay.
And I think
that's a whole different story. I want you to have that, but I want to stay with your childhood memories of watching these teams. And I would be, I'm from Los Angeles, and whenever the Dodgers were in town, the games would be on and televised locally. And I'd see those same hot dog wrappers hitting players in the side of the head, or always having to back out of the box and getting the piece of dust out of their eye. I think most of that was because Juan Marichal's fastball was a reason to want to ask for a little additional time. But the Mark Twain analogy, the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. You got to live that out in '87, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. It really can be, and it was, as I said. But you mentioned the Dodgers. So my best memories as a youth growing up was with the Dodgers. My father, as Steve mentioned, was in the financial business, and he somehow connected with Bill Singer, the great right-handed pitcher for the Dodgers and the Angels. Yes. Yeah. And my dad was mentoring Bill and to get in the stock and bond business after, Bill's career.
Okay.
And so we became good friends, and we'd go down to LA. We'd stay at Bill's home and, go to the ballpark early and go on the field and in the clubhouse. And that was really an amazing experience to, as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old boy to be able to do that. Was just really, really wonderful. So that was my real exposure to, being on the field and being in that environment. And, I don't recall having those thoughts of like, oh, I'm going to do this, or I want to do this. It was just this is kind of what I did. And kind of evolved into more than I ever thought.
Yeah.
Way
Well,
more.
good feet, good hands, a strong arm, that'll put you at shortstop. And even at the little league or pony league level, I guess, who was your coach most of that? Did your dad coach you as well? Or did you have Chico's bail bonds? Was that the jersey that you wore back in those days?
No, we, Coldwell Banker, I think, was the sponsor. My father spent a lot of time being in the stock and bond business on the West Coast. The market closes at, I believe it's 1:30, and
yeah,
he'd go back to the office and do some work, go out to lunches with Steve and others. That was before Steve, but anyway, and he'd be home fairly early in the day where there's still sunlight, so we could go, get out in the front yard where I could, pitch to him, and then we'd go down to the local school, Wolf Grade, and hit balls, and I'd catch ground balls and fly balls and that whole bit. I wish he'd thrown me more batting practice. I might have gone higher in the first round, but yeah, I was blessed to have a father who was very devoted to his family, and really he loved baseball, and just every time I wanted to go out in the yard, he'd do it. So, but in fact, our property insurance dropped us because of all the broken windows we'd had in the front yard from throwing the ball.
Well, you must have done some hitting if you were breaking windows, or were you pitching to dad and letting him do it?
I was pitching to him. He was catching. He was catching me in the corner.
Yeah, awesome. Well,
we had a nice retaining wall in the front yard that I threw the semi, one of those rubber balls against every day. And I think I give a lot of credit for it developing my footwork, because I'd have to sidestep planter boxes and pillars and steps and everything to make a few plays, which I did. So
you didn't use the fuzzless tennis ball, the old one where all the fuzz came off? Because that, for me, I could throw a curveball with that a lot better than just a regular right out of the can tennis ball.
Yeah, right. I understood. I get it. It. You have more restriction. So no, just a rubber ball.
Okay. And then now high school, this is where Steven comes in. You end up in high school and you played all 4 years, right? So the ability as a freshman, was there any nervousness that you had? Man, I'm going to get some of these seniors. They're not going to want me on this team, but you played your way onto it, correct?
Well, I was on the freshman team, and then I got called up right at the end for the playoffs, the NCS championship, North Coast Section Championship. Played. I think I might have gotten in a game late in the game, but other than that, I really didn't play much because of Gary Latore and Steve. Gary Latore, they could talk about me, being a pretty good shortstop, but Gary Latore was just probably the greatest shortstop to ever come out of Marin County in my book, because the way he swung the bat, and he was great. I didn't realize he was the MVP of that league, Steve.
Yeah, he hit something like 335 with power. Yeah. He could throw a football like 70 yards. There was nothing he couldn't do.
Yeah, he was just
grew up with him, and Tiburon would tell these stories like he was Zeus. So yeah. When Coach Endress said, we've got a kid who's going to be better than Latore, I'm like, whoa. So a lot was expected of you. And now we start, it was a big deal for you to get called up to the varsity as a freshman, because that rarely happened. I think that happens more now, but it didn't happen much. But I also want to mention that Bud grew up in an unincorporated area known as Greenbrae. It's a very nice neighborhood. And there's something in the water there, because especially at that particular time, it produced an inordinate number of incredible athletes. One of Bud's neighbors was USC football coach Pete Carroll. And I can just tell you that other kids who grew up with Bud and played high school with me, who were from that area, went to, I think 2 of them got full rides to USC. Another kid who was a catcher got a full ride to Santa Clara. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And then of course there's Buddy. So then Buddy gets to high school, and he also played for my dad on that Joe DiMaggio team, and we had the state championship won at Albert Field, which was a local field, and a guy comes up to the plate, hits a 2-run game-winning double off the right center field fence to beat us, and that kid's name was Tony Gwynn, and he was playing for the Long Beach Jets. But Bud, talk about Al Endress. Holy cow. I think he really made you his project. He recognized your talent right away and he cultivated it. Was he someone that when he got a hold of you, he goes, okay, I now am with a guy who's going to make me the very best I can be, and I can now really go somewhere in this game?
Yeah, the thing about, I mean, Al was so gifted, as a coach. He, as we know, we haven't mentioned yet, but he played in the Dodger organization, which was so well known for just playing solid fundamental baseball in those days. And then he was also a running back for a year or so for the 49ers. And then I think he played in the Canadian Football League as well. So just a really, really great athlete, had an amazing presence about him, commanded respect and discipline. And so, he was someone we all respected highly. And he would, Al, we were pretty good. We had a lot of good players, as Steve mentioned. Really, many much better than me. And Al made us believe we were even better than what we were. Is how I really describe it. He had an ability to really get us to believe not only were we good, that we were better than what we were. And we had, Steve will remember, we would take infield with 2 balls, and we'd have 2 balls flying around the whole time in the infield. And it was really intimidating to the other teams. And, Al was a great dresser on and off the field. And, we had really incredible uniforms. We had short hair. We were like an army. When we stepped on the field, you could see these other teams were like, whoa, that it's like we had a 2-run lead before the first pitch. So, he was just a wonderful leader who passed away a little over a year ago now that I certainly miss. And it was kind of like a second father to me. But he knew how to develop us. He would always, he'd go to the NCAA conventions, college coaches conventions, come back with all kinds of ideas and how to run a practice. And, we'd have all these stations. We were just so far ahead of, I think, other teams in those days. And then as far as he was so well respected on a nationwide basis because he did go to the convention every year and he got to know all the college coaches. So, when he reached out to a college for all of us, which he did, I mean, he really helped promote his players. It wasn't just about, hey, let's win a championship at Redwood. No, it was that let's win a championship at Redwood. Let's get these kids to college. Let's get these guys to the pro level. And he really worked hard at that. And I like to tell the story that he got me a full ride to University of Texas, sight unseen. And that's before video. Cliff Gustafson was the coach, and Cliff Gustafson took his word and offered me a full ride to University of Texas without ever seeing me play. Wow. And it's all because of the respect that Endress had from these people. And so when he spoke, people listened, and the scouts did as well. And Steve, I don't think I would have been a first-round pick had it not been for Al Endress and just kind of him selling me and promoting me and believing in me. So that's how I feel about it.
It wasn't just you, it was the whole program, and it was all the other great players that we had, and there were great players, as I mentioned, who got full rides to the very best colleges. But just to give you an idea of how big a deal Redwood baseball was at that time, I mean, we had one game, I think we had 7,000 people. When we played the big games, the championship and playoff games, it was a sellout. There would be 1,000, 2,000 people. We would travel and we would play in these tournaments, and people would be, I can remember, buddy, cab drivers who knew about you, and you'd come into a town and, oh yeah, Redwood. They knew who we were. It had been in the papers. And I can remember in particular, and we're going to be talking about this guy a little later because there was an event that is not really related to this, but we went into San Diego and we played a team called Kearney High. And I remember people talking about, it was this matchup between our shortstop, Bud Biancalana, who was the best shortstop in Northern California, and their shortstop, a guy by the name of Alan Trammell, who was the best shortstop in Southern California, later makes the Hall of Fame with the Detroit Tigers. And so that's what it was like. And so, Buddy, when you were a first round draft pick and you had all these colleges, it was because Al Andrus had promoted that whole program, and his players were marquee players, and you were believed. If you played for him, you were fundamentally sound and you were ready to go. And he prepared players for the game far beyond high school.
Yeah, he once when I signed with the Royals, and there's Alan Trammell. Yeah. So when I signed with the Royals in '78 and reported, it took me a little while to sign. We're kind of holding out a bit, and but got it done. And I reported to Rookie Ball, and there were players there from college kids from 4-year players, 3-year players from University of Miami and other great baseball schools. And when I got on the field with them, I mean, they were bigger and stronger and more mature baseball players at that time. But as far as being fundamentally sound, I was way ahead of them because of the instruction we got from Al Andrus. So it was certainly great. And Trammell went on to play at Detroit, and what a neat guy. And I remember him saying, I ran into him.
Yeah, why don't you tell that story?
I'll tell the story. I know you were gonna start it. You want me to tell it, Steve?
Yeah, I love this story.
Yeah. So I ran into Alan. I think it was the year that he was inducted in the Hall of Fame, and I saw him. I think it was at the winter baseball meetings, and went up and we chatted for a bit. And he said, "Oh yeah, man, I remember playing you guys, down there in San Diego." He was at Kearney High School, and he said, "Man, you guys had a left-handed pitcher that was like one of the best pitchers I ever faced." And he was talking about Frank Ferroni, just a really great pitcher, unarguably, maybe the best left-handed pitcher that ever come out of Marin County, who, I told the story. I think I was speaking at a function one night, and I played behind Brett Saberhagen, a 2-time Cy Young Award winner, and who was really, nails. But I said, if it came down to a big game, there's nobody I'd rather, play behind than Frank Ferroni, even Brett Saberhagen. That's how good Frank Ferroni was, and what a competitor he was. So, and a great guy as well.
I love the fact that Trammell is going into the Hall of Fame, and what he remembers in the conversation is this high school pitcher, Frank Ferroni, who remains a good friend of ours today. And he's going to be on our show, Harper, in a couple of months when we're going to do a College World Series show. He was on Cal State Fullerton's 1979 College World Series title team, played in the Orioles organization. The only reason Frank was not a major league star is he got injured. The talent and work ethic was there. And you had the work ethic too, buddy, from the beginning. And what happens in the minor leagues as you're tweaking your talent, the work ethic, what they're teaching you, the technique? Is there a Royal way? Like we know there was a Dodger way. Talk about, this was a really great period of time in Kansas City Royals history. There was talent, really good managers and coaches, and you were very lucky to be a part of that.
I was lucky. Yeah, it was. The Royals built their organization. They loved, pitching. They did a great job developing pitching and defense and speed. That's we played on turf in Kansas City.
Yep.
If you want to call it that. It was like cement with a piece of outdoor carpet over it. It was, my God, crazy playing on it. Then it'd get wet. I mean, I can't believe I played on it. But speed was a big thing. We had Willie Wilson, who could really fly. It's one of the prettiest things I've seen in all the sports is to watch Willie Wilson hit a triple.
Yep.
Into the corner, in Royal Stadium at the time, now Kauffman Stadium. And it was amazing. He was a great football player as well, Harper. I think he was going to go to Michigan as a wide receiver. But he was one of those guys could have, probably played in any of the 3 major sports, right? Excluding hockey. But speed and defense, we in 85 when we won the World Series, we weren't the best hitting club, but we caught the ball well. We had great starting pitching. In fact, I noticed we were 2-1 underdogs against the Cardinals in the World Series in '85, and I was like thinking, how could we 2-1 underdogs when we have the starting pitching that we had? In fact, we're all getting together in here next month in May. We're having the '85 reunion team, 40 years, hard to believe.
Wow.
Along with the 2015 team. But pitching and defense, if you play catch, you got to play catch. And you pitch it and catch it, you got a chance. And we had a chance. We had a great hitter in George Brett, middle of the lineup. And we had a lot of guys that, would get on base, and we caught the ball and we won.
Yeah. I'll get into that in a minute. If you don't mind, could I take you back to high school just for another moment or two? First and foremost,
you mean Notre Dame High School?
Yeah, that's where I went. Yeah.
Yeah. Granada,
we didn't have it. Well, Tim Foley went there back in the day. Gio Stanton is from there. Hunter Green with the Cincinnati Reds right now. We had a pretty good program. But what I wanted to ask in terms of coaching, there are certain guys that I know didn't teach me a doggone thing. I was just there and I did the whatever. And I'm not talking baseball, football specific. I'm just saying in general. It sounds to me like your experience, not only did I know how to do my feet, I knew how to do it right. I knew how to do the drill right. And I learned a valuable lesson. Tell me a little bit more about what it is that you took with you to the next level that prepared you to go, I'm ready for this. You said there were bigger, faster guys that were out there, but I knew how to slide. I knew how to get the ball out of my glove a little bit faster. I knew how to run this drill to where I was the one that they were going, hey, you need to do it Buddy's way.
Yeah, good question. So, I knew where I had to be on the field at all times. People talk about mental mistakes, and maybe hopefully you can tell by now I don't have much of an ego, but I can honestly tell you I don't ever remember making a mental mistake in playing baseball. And part of that is the instincts. And growing up, we weren't told, we weren't watching the coaches all the time to tell us to go to third base. We use our instincts. Can we make it to third base?
Yeah.
We played hot box every day in the yard, next door neighbor's yard grass. So we really developed the instincts, number one. And then Coach Al Endress, all of the drills that we would use to quicken the feet and move the feet in the proper position, to turn this way or turn that way. He just really prepared us. And it was second nature to me with everything that I was doing, on the field. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. But I didn't know that I was going to make it. You mentioned, yeah, I can do this. Well, I didn't know I was going to make it to the big leagues. It was a grind.
Sure.
It was a grind.
There's a lot of work,
and
obviously.
It's a grind now. I mean, it's never been more competitive any of these sports than it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with more people and more training.
Better training.
I didn't have a tee or a batting cage or anything like that. I went from football, basketball, baseball. And by the time I get to baseball, I can't hit a curveball anymore because I haven't seen one for months. And so that to me was a real drastic reality check. And that the way kids train now, they will have seen 1,000 pitches, or at least with a batting cage, you have the opportunity to do that. That didn't really exist back in the late 70s for you, did it? Unless you went to a Flukies and had a stack of quarters this high and you went through that. Is that something?
Yeah. No, we didn't do that. We'd grab a friend and go down to the field and hit fly balls and throw little batting practice together and catch some ground balls.
I was certainly willing to throw BP to Greg Zanino and Buddy, and I know I did on many occasions. So at least I was there for you.
Yeah, no, you were there. Yeah, we lived in a great community, Harper.
Share the recruiting process for you. You mentioned a full ride without even being seen to go to Texas. One, for me, Texas baseball. Are you kidding me? Two, the full scholarship thing. Talk a little bit about back then. Colleges, and even up till recently, you have to split a scholarship for you to be offered a full one sight unseen. That obviously is something that Coach Andrus did a great job of promoting you, and you be reaping the benefit of that. And what an honor it is to be a part of that. But when did the first coaches and scouts and baseball people start approaching you and want to visit with you?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, the first card I filled out for an organization was we were down playing in South City, there, South San Francisco, Steve. And after the game, a scout came up to me. I can't remember which organization. Yeah, they were good, is right. And a scout came up to me after the game and gave me a card to fill out. I can't remember which organization, but that was kind of the beginning of it. And then it just kind of escalated from there. As far as the colleges, I don't know if it was maybe the end of my junior year or maybe even the beginning of the senior. I'm just not quite sure. But and that was an exciting time for me, to figure out where, I was from, as Steve mentioned, a very educated family. And I was definitely going to go to college, and then, and I thought it was gonna be like a third or fourth round pick is what I had heard. And the morning of the draft, and I'll get back to all the schools, but the morning of the draft, I got a call. I was upstairs in my room and I had a phone in my room, and John Sherholtz, who at the time, who's now in the Hall of Fame, John Sherholtz was the scouting director for the Royals, called early morning about 7:30. He said, buddy, this is John Sherholtz of the Royals. And my mother picked up the phone right around the same time. And John said, we're headed into the draft right now, and we're picking 25th. And if you're still available, we'd like to make you our first round pick. Would you be interested in signing? And my mother said, no, he's going to college. I said, Mom, I got this. I said, hang up the phone. I got this. And so she hung up the phone. I told John, I said, yeah, John, if all things are right, I would be interested in signing. And there's John. And so I ended up, that's what I ended up. I mean, it's what I always wanted to do, is to play baseball, and you go to college to get an education so that you can pursue a career that you're interested in doing. Well, my career that I was interested in at the time was playing baseball.
Yeah.
And so I went ahead and signed and I had signed a letter of intent at Arizona State. I just fell in love with everything about Arizona State, although it might have been a mistake now that I look back on it. But it worked out. It worked out well. Life is very interesting, right? I think it was John Lennon who said, "Life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans."
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, it's been a great journey. Baseball has been very, very good to me. And
Chico Escuela, right? Chico. That's a good
Chico Escuela. Is that who it was? Yeah, right. Okay,
yeah.
Good. Wonderful.
Buddy, you would have been
well read. And go ahead.
I think you would have won a College World Series in 1981 with the Arizona State Sun Devils.
Steve, maybe. However, to play at Arizona State, you really had to hit, and I wasn't hitting that much. So who knows? I might have sat the bench at Arizona State.
Well, I don't think so, because you have to have defense, and I know they had a good shortstop, but I really don't remember who it was. I don't think it was a guy who got to the big leagues, and you did get to the big leagues. So my guess is your talent would have shown through. And you know what, Bud, you might have gotten, I know they had a really good batting instructor, so you might have benefited from more instruction.
Right.
Offensively, and you would have been playing on a team that team scored 10, 15 runs a game, that Sun Devil club under Jim Brock in those days. You would have been with, well, I don't know if you would have played with Bonds. If you'd gone to you wouldn't have been with Barry.
He would have been a little after me. Yeah.
Those were some really good years for Arizona State baseball. But
Hubie Brooks was there, and I can't remember the other guys, but yeah, there were a lot of good players. It was a great program.
What was it about the trip down there that sealed the deal for you? Was it just being on their campus and seeing how their stadium fitted with everything else? Is there anything else?
I've always, and I say this to this day. I was just in Arizona a couple weeks ago. I said there's no place on the in the States that I feel better than Arizona. There's just something about it. I always feel good there, and it's kind of fell in love with it. It's just the weather, although I wasn't there during the summer, right? But the weather's great. Just the whole environment of the school, the tradition of the baseball tradition there, stadium. It was just really a big time program. Probably, arguably there and Texas and USC were probably the three biggest programs in the country at that time.
Were either of the other two schools that you just mentioned, were they on your map as well? Were they recruiting you heavily?
USC a little bit, but I think they kind of just dropped off. I don't know who they had there playing during that time. Steve, do you know?
Yeah, they had a guy named Dan Davidsmeyer, who was a good friend of one of our teammates, Mickey Meister, two of our teammates went to USC, and in fact, I was almost a third as recruited walk-on. But yeah, Dan Davidsmeyer was a good player. He was a All-American shortstop at USC. Unfortunately, he got drafted by the Milwaukee Brewers and found himself behind Robin Yount, which can happen.
Yeah.
So you would have had to compete with a really good player like Davidsmeyer, he was a good hitter. He was a taller guy. And as I mentioned, he was good friends with our teammate, Mickey Meister, who was arguably the best high school pitcher in the nation in the last couple of years of the 70s and was a star at USC. But yeah.
Yeah, they backed off me at some point there. And then, but I think I mentioned Texas. Texas was a consideration as well. And
Would
Cal.
you have tried, Cal or Stanford? Were they at interest at all, or did they already know that you had ASU on your mind?
Yeah, Cal was very interested. Stanford inquired. I don't think I had the grades to get in. I know I didn't have the grades to get into Stanford in those days. But
Right.
Yeah.
What would your dream list be? I mean, just to go to a school, any school, would it be Harvard, Yale? If anybody out there that your destination spot to make mom happy, what would that have been?
That's a great question. Great question. Maybe Texas.
Okay.
Texas, right? It's a good school. It's a really good school. Great sports, great baseball tradition. Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
Cal at the time, Cal, you know.
Yeah, you would. He would. We had a couple teammates who were at Cal. We had Greg Zanino went to Cal.
Yeah.
He was. He's been on this show a few weeks back. The Cal team was very strong at that time. We had another player named Steve Hoffmeyer was in that program.
Right.
And we that program was filled with a lot of guys that we competed against in high school, Bud, such as Mitch Hawley, who was I think he set Cal's record for career saves.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a really strong program. Your dad went to Cal, if I recall correctly.
Right, and my sister, yeah.
And your
sister. As I look back on it, Harper and both you, Steve, probably Cal would have been my best choice. I think. I really liked the coach there, Bob Milano at the time. Was just a great guy. It probably would have been my best choice.
Wow. I know that my dad, your dad, and Greg Zanino's dad, and a man named Aldo Pasquinelli. My dad was considered the honorary Italian among them. And they would go when we got out of high school, and other than when they traveled a little bit to see us play, whether it was I was in college somewhere, they went to many Cal games together. And that's really where your dad and my dad really bonded and became very good friends.
My father and Coach Endress both were disappointed in my choosing Arizona State. They thought it was a mistake. So, but
now I want to get to the 1985 World Series. And let me preface this by saying it was really an unbelievable series for me personally, because there must have been something like 6 or 7 people participating in that World Series who I knew personally, who I had either known in high school, or I had known or played against in college, or had known and played with or against professionally, because I had been in the Cardinal organization. So there was you had a teammate who I'd played with in the Jayhawk League named Bud Black. The Cardinals had an outstanding right-hander who was really a teammate of mine, and we were kind of a 1-2 punch at one time, and that was Danny Cox, twice an 18-game winner for the Cardinals. They had a second baseman named Curtis Ford, who was a fast, good defensive player. And I knew a lot of the Cardinals coaches, Whitey Herzog and Dave Ricketts and Darryl Knowles and a lot of these guys, because the year I was with St. Louis, the big leaguers had been on strike in 81, and a lot of the coaches and roving minor league instructors spent a lot of time throughout the minor league system because they weren't really scouting or with the big league team. And so we got a lot of attention. So I knew a lot of these guys. It was just, it blew me away that I'm watching the Kansas City Royals and the St. Louis Cardinals playing. First of all, they're right down the street from each other in the state of Missouri. And that there's Bud Biancalana, who I know, and there's Danny Cox, who I know. And it was really something. But, tell us about this amazing, because this is really where your zone training begins. And you can talk about what it was like to play in that series. And let me just preface one thing. I've said too much. You guys had to twice come back from 3-1 against Toronto in the American League playoffs, where Brett just put you guys on his back and carried the team. And then in the World Series, which I think was more of a team effort with really great pitching and great defense, and you were such a part of it. Wow. The world champions of 1985, Kansas City with Bud Biancalana.
Hard to believe. You grow up, like I said, throwing the ball against the wall in Greenbrae, and playing catch with your dad, and all of a sudden I'm in the World Series. And it was so wild. I, as a kid, I knew I wanted to play in the big leagues, but I never thought about playing in a World Series. That was just something I'd watch on TV every October. And then even when I got to the big leagues, I never could fathom playing the World Series. It was just, I was in the survival mode throughout my career. And when you're in survival mode, you don't have the vision of what's possible, the field of all possibilities that I have now. And so never thought about playing the World Series, right? So I'm sitting in my locker before game 1 of the World Series, and I had to be on the field in 20 minutes for introductions, where they introduce your name. They stick a camera right in front of your face as you run to the foul line, and you're seen by millions of people all over the world. And so I'm sitting in my locker, and 20 minutes to go, and all of a sudden I am completely blindsided by fear. And usually, I'd get nervous before a game. That was typical. And, instead of sitting there with how I was feeling, I would typically mood alter. I'd make myself a sandwich in the equipment manager's office. But with 20 minutes to go and completely paralyzed by fear, I knew for sure that I couldn't catch a ground ball if it was hit to me. Okay. Maybe even catch a ball that was thrown to me. That's how I felt. I'd never felt fear like that in my life before. And I was like, what am I going to do? I knew for sure I couldn't play in that moment. And what happened was I just said to myself, this is really scary. And I sat there, and that fear subsided enough to where I could actually stand up, grab my bat, my glove, and my helmet, and make my way to the dugout, and wait for my name to be introduced, and which I did. And what happened next was I went out and I played unarguably the 7 best baseball games of my life.
Wow.
I hit 73 points higher than my career average. I played errorless at shortstop, and choose my words very carefully when I tell you that every single ball hit me right in the sweet spot of my glove, and every single throw for 7 games came out of my hand with perfect speed and trajectory. And it was a feeling of not being able to doing wrong almost if I tried. And there's one specific play that I love talking about. And we were playing, it was game, 4 or 5, maybe, 4 or 5 in St. Louis. And Ozzie Smith stole second, and the ball kicked away from Frank White, our second baseman, into shallow left center field. And I hustled after it, and I, picked it up barehanded and just kind of wheeled back and threw a soft throw to Frank at second base to keep Ozzie there. And in the moment, it's like, it's no big deal. It's simple play. Pick up a ball, you turn and you throw it, right? No big deal. But in the moment, I had the feeling that I could have kicked it to him. And I don't know if you've ever kicked a baseball, but it's not like kicking a soccer ball. Okay?
It feels stuck.
And so I had that experience of, whoa, something special, something very, very unique is taking place here. And so I just kind of rode that wave, but I didn't know what was happening in my brain and my body that allowed me to experience the game as slowing down and not thinking, and very fluid, effortless motion. And if you ask 100 athletes in any sport how they felt when they were playing their best, they would typically describe it, if they took the time to think about it, they typically describe it, I wasn't thinking, and I wasn't rushing, and everything was just very fluid and effortless, and my timing was better, and so that's what happened to me. And however, 20 months, almost, I guess I was I was told, at least, I was the leading vote getter of position players for MVP. Our Cy Young Award-winning pitcher Brett Saberhagen won the award, rightfully so. He had a great series. And then 20 months later, I was out of the big leagues because I had no idea what happened.
Wow.
It allowed me to play so well. And a lot of people thought maybe I played over my head, and I don't know whether I played it. But now, knowing what I know now about brain functioning and how the whole system, our whole system works, I realized, no, I didn't play over my head. I was just able to access my full ability. And granted, I chose to do that at a pretty good time, right? The series.
Sure did.
Where we won we won the Royals won the first World Series that they'd ever won. So it was, a really amazing time of my life. The fans really embraced me. It was, Game 6, Game 7, the whole stadium's chanting my name, and Ozzie Smith was the opposite, the shortstop for the Cardinals, and who's now in the Hall of Fame, and fans were chanting my name every time I'd come to the plate, and they really just took were very supportive. And I remember after Game 7, I was being interviewed by Karen Kornacki of the KNBC, whatever, the NBC affiliate there, I believe. And I said to her, I said, man, I'm just so appreciative of the way the fans embraced me. I just would love to be able to give something back to them. And I caught myself and I said, well, we just won a World Series for them. I guess that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But there was something percolating at a deeper level that I didn't know at the time. I had no idea what I was referring to. And what I now know is what I was referring to is, something very, very special. And it's being able to access the zone and teach it on a regular basis. That's what I do. And I've worked with athletes in 13 pro sports now and over 20 amateur sports, and done one study and five research projects on the effectiveness of it. So,
okay. So before we get into that, an interesting thing happened that year. It's really amazing how the confluence of events occurs. Now, if we all remember, nowadays we just go to MLB.com and we look at the box scores that way. But in those days, you looked at a newspaper. And when you looked at the box scores and you're looking at the Kansas City Royals, you would see Wilson and Brett, and then some guy named BC.LA.NA. And I knew it was Buddy Biancalana, but not too many. And somehow or other, this name becomes known by the talk show host David Letterman. And this is around the time that Pete Rose is closing in on the all-time record for most base hits in a career. And he starts doing this funny thing where he's putting your name up on a board next to Pete Rose. Pete Rose now has 4,190 hits, and Bud Biancalana is close behind with 11. And of course, you are, I guess you'd say, the butt of a joke, a funny joke. I don't think it was anything that made you feel that you were being made fun of particularly, but it was happening. And then, of course, now you're the hero of the World Series, and you go on David Letterman because now you're the hero. Now you're well known. You're not BCLNA anymore. And that had to be a really great experience. You go to New York, and man, you're in Hollywood now. You're in New York. What an amazing time for Bud Biancalana.
Yeah, it was wild. We had after the series, I got a call. I think my dad got a call from Tom Ross.
Sure,
with the Redwood, big tennis player, worked for Octagon, which is a worldwide sports agency. And Tom called and wanted to offer his services to me and kind of marketing me. And so he met me in a limo in LaGuardia Airport with a writer from People magazine. And the People magazine followed me around for a couple of days, and around New York I was on the Letterman show. The next morning I was on the Today Show with Doug Flutie and Mark Gastineau and some great hockey player, the guy for Rangers. I can't remember his name. And we were modeling for Oleg Cassini, and then I was on some other shows. We went there to Washington D.C. So it was kind of a very interesting time for me. And at the time, Steve, I my wife at the time, when the phone was started ringing off the hook for me after the series, it was crazy, you know, like I would get numerous calls every day, like, we want you to come do this, go do that. And I told my wife, I said, you know, I really don't have any interest in doing any of that stuff, you know? And she said, well, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I said, you're right. So I went and did it, but, and it was fun, you know, I mean, the Letterman thing was fun and, you know, but it's all superficial stuff, right? You know, I was more interested in deeper stuff like I do now. But it was a good time. You know, some of the funny things regarding Letterman was, you know, during when that little skit started that he did with me and Rose, we were in Chicago in August playing the White Sox, and I got a call one morning, and you know, a few writers called me and said, you know, what do you think of Letterman poking funny and all that stuff? I hadn't even seen it. And so they called my mother and they said, you know, what do you think of this David Letterman poking fun at your son? And she said, she was a very innocent, naive woman, and she just said, well, you know, if it were a higher rated show, I'd, you know, maybe, you know, I'd be bothered by it. Letterman loved that. Absolutely loved it, you know. And then Quisenberry gave me, you know, when I was going on the show, Dan Quisenberry gave me a great comment. He said, tell Letterman that you're closer to Rose than he is to Johnny Carson, you know. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was very funny. So it was a good time, you know, really good time. The next day we were invited to stay over for the Saturday Night Live filming with and party with Madonna. I couldn't stay out of flat the next day, but anyway, it was, you know, one of those things you don't plan on in life, but enjoy it.
Yeah, I love the fact that you gave him you joked about yourself, this bat that you've got in your lap there in the photo. And you said, here's a gift for you, Dave, a bat. Never been used, you know, as if you had never made contact.
No ball marks on it. No ball marks.
Ball marks on it. Yeah.
Oh, good Lord. Oh, that's hilarious. But if you don't mind me asking you, when did you know? I mean, as soon as you get to the organization, you have to admit, you mentioned Willie Wilson's name. We've obviously George and some of the other greats that are a part of that. You mentioned Brett. When did you start realizing this is a really good organization, and we may have a chance here, not only go to the playoffs, but to actually make some noise?
Yeah, well, in 1980, they went to the World. In 77, 78, and 79, and 80, maybe all 4 years.
Yeah,
or just 3 years, all 4 years. They went to the playoffs against the Yankees, you know, and they lost 3 of those 4 years. In 80, they won, and they played Philadelphia in the World Series and lost. So those were, you know, when I was drafted though in 78, they had not yet made it to the playoffs. But you know, and I didn't know anything about Kansas City. The only thing I knew about Kansas City was George Brett, you know, played for the Royals.
Sure.
That was the only thing I knew. You know, so, but then, you know, they started putting together these, you know, 4 really good seasons, 77 through 80, culminating in the World Series in 80. So I knew that, you know, this is a really good organization and they're doing things well. And, you know, I struggled early on in the minors hitting and even a little defensively. But once I got to AAA, things really started to click for me. You know, I really started to figure it out a little bit in AA. AAA, I got to the big leagues you know, one step below the big leagues, and I started to really catch the ball really, really well. I won a Silver Glove that year as the best shortstop in the minor leagues, and I hit better than I ever had hit. Got called up in September. You know, played a few games, you know, no big deal. But you know, and 83 got called up, 84 most of the year, 85, 86, 87 I was at most of the year. So.
Were you on the bench? Do you mind me asking? Were you on the bench when George had that thing at Yankee Stadium where they said his bat was corked? Or no, I'm sorry, the pine tar was too high.
Yeah, no, I was not. I came up later in the year there.
That was earlier. No, okay. Please forgive me. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was not. I was listening to it on the radio though in Omaha. Yeah.
Yeah, that I'll call it a tirade when he comes out and they take the home run away from him. That's one of those great baseball moments.
Oh right? My God, yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Well,
sure. Yeah. It's funny. Sorry, Harper, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then the speed. You mentioned that earlier, playing on that turf. I was drafted by the Chiefs, so I'm very familiar with the building and went to one of the games there when I was first in in training camp. But you mentioned Willie Wilson. I'm looking at the 85 roster now. Hal McRae. In right field, you had Darryl Motley. Is that correct? And then Lonnie Smith, Frank White, who could run. You got 4 or 5 guys. If they got on first, you're looking at a double if you're playing against them, right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm just saying we have our second short. You're right. The whole outfield can run. You bet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You yourself and all that, and then Whitey's team. Everyone on Whitey. I mean, Coleman.
That was baseball in those days.
Goodness gracious, yeah. Ozzie could run. TP, maybe not so much, but he could bring anybody in. But
Willie
McGee, yes, thank you. That's what I was thinking of. Go ahead, Steven.
Well, as a pitcher, you really had to learn to hold guys on because that was baseball in those days.
Yeah.
A lot of speed, and you were constantly dealing with that. You needed catchers who could throw them out, and you had to hold those guys on. But, Buddy, interesting note. First of all, the very first time that I ever saw ESPN was when I went into my hotel room in Johnson City, Tennessee to play for the Cardinals. And I was with my roommate. We turned it on, and it's ESPN, and it's a minor league game. I don't know whether it was Omaha. I'm not sure. But the very first thing I see is you playing shortstop, I think AAA. And also during the years, most of the years in which you were played in the major leagues, I lived in Los Angeles and was going to law school. And during those years, you would leave me a lot of passes whenever the Royals were in town. I can remember going with a couple of my USC friends who also knew you because they were also Redwood.
I need to cash in those a little bit now. I got to see how you're going to make that up for me. Let me think about it.
I've got you on Take 5 with Steven Travers.
Well, you've given me some of your books. You've written 29 books, Harper. You know that.
You're telling me I've never given you one of my books?
No, you have. I'm just saying you have. Yeah.
Yeah. But I can remember the first time I saw you. We went down to Anaheim. There were 60,000 people, and it was a pennant race. And then another time, and I remember you came to my house and we had dinner, and I went to like a Friday game or a Saturday and then a Sunday games, 2-day games, and you're playing the California Angels. And I'm telling you, this guy hits a homer both days. Hits one off Don Sutton and another one off, I want to say Ron Romanic.
Wow, you got amazing memory. Ron Romanic.
Yeah, but I mean, holy cow, Buddy goes deep both days. But and the other thing, I lived in an apartment that was owned by the Brett family.
Oh, so right.
George Brett's brother, Bobby Brett, was my landlord, and I always made sure that when I went to pay my rent, I never mailed it in. I would drive down. They had an office right on the water, beautiful, right on the water in Hermosa Beach. So it was beautiful down there anyway. And if it was the off season, George would be in there chewing Copenhagen and with his cowboy boots, with his brothers talking baseball. And I would come in and here's your check. By the way, I'm friends with Bud Biancalana. So I would have these conversations with George. And then later on, he was put on the phone with me the day Randy Johnson went into the World Series. And he says to me, he goes, did you go to USC? And I say, let me get rid of this here. He goes, did you go to USC?
Buddy, what kind of ringtone do we need to get Steven when he's on the air? We got right. He's got Mario Brothers playing. Come on, man. Play Fight On or something. We
got to get Conquest. No, but and I'll clean out what George said. He goes, well, the heck with USC. I was the best high school baseball player in Southern California in 1971, and Rob Dato wouldn't give me a scholarship. So those were funny little anecdotes. But you once talked, you made a speech, I think, to a group in Marin, and you talked about the crowds and the momentum of a pennant race. So I'd like to hear more about what it's like to be in a pennant race. You get from July, now we're in August, the team is still in it. We're 2 games out, we're a game up. We've got a 3-game series against our arch rivals. We're playing the Yankees. These are key games. There's 40,000 people every night. The media is really getting into it. How exciting that had to be.
Yeah, it's there's nothing like a pennant race, and in baseball, unlike the NFL, Harper, you play every day. It's it's mentally it's really grueling, right? I know you're practicing every day, but and you're in a race. Every game is huge. Every play is really big. And in those days, we weren't mentally equipped to deal with pressure like players are nowadays. We just weren't mentally, emotionally as strong as we got it done. But going to the ballpark every night, the buzz is just really something, And we played a huge series against the Angels because we were going back and forth with them for the Western Division Championship. At the time of the Western Division Championship.
Yeah.
And we played a series in Kansas City, and it was really, really intense, but fun. I loved big games. I remember, playing games like in Minnesota in the Metrodome where it was so loud. There'd be 50 or 60,000 people there, whatever it's at. And it was so loud. And I'd be yelling out there, hit me the ball. I just loved it. The bigger the situation, the more I wanted the ball often. It wasn't always the case, but that's how I felt in the World Series. I just something really took over in me. And I had great defensive players next to me with Frank and George Brett, but I wanted the ball hit to me in the World Series because I knew I was locked in, and I knew I had the best chance of making the play of anybody. But again, it wasn't always the case. But it was the same way, in these big games. I would love. I have dreams of going back and playing, in World Series again. And I am so excited when I realize we're in the World Series again. In my dreams, it's like, wow, this is so great, because I didn't, even though I had that confidence in the series, I didn't always play with that level of confidence. There are many times I didn't want the ball hit to me. I wanted the ball to go elsewhere, and that's a crummy way to play the game.
Yeah,
really crummy way to play the game, but that's just where it led me to what I do now. So it's been a gift.
yeah.
But nothing like a pennant race and the buzz that's at the ballpark night in and night out.
Buddy, were you a big talker? Did you say things out loud, or did you cover your mouth with your glove and say things? Were you a whisperer or a mumbler? What kind of ways would you competitively, deal with rivalries and big games? So what was your way of expressing yourself there out on the field?
I think it just depended on where I was emotionally at the time, Harper. If I was feeling really good, I would yell, hit me the ball, bases loaded, 1 out, give me the ball. I want to turn a double play. And then there were times where emotionally I might not be as in a solid state. And I would just be kind of in a neutral state, like, okay, just be ready. If they hit it to me, I got to make the play. So I was, I kept things inside more so. Again, I didn't know how to process the emotions in those days. But I was in survival mode.
Were you a guy that if anyone gets on second and there's a dead ball for a few seconds, you'd walk over to that guy, give him a little pat on the thigh with your glove? Or did you have a lot of friends in the league that you enjoyed playing either with or against?
Yeah. I would always say hello to guys. Rex Hudler became real friendly with Rex Hudler, who was from Northern California. Steve, you probably know that. He was a first round pick by the Yankees the same year I was. We played against each other in the minor league. So, what's that?
A very enthusiastic guy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I saw him the other day. I saw him last weekend. And then acquaintances around the league, Trammell would always say hello to because of our days of playing against each other in high school. And the one game, I should say, we played against each other. But, I was not able to play with joy. So I wasn't enjoying playing at that level. I was just surviving playing at that level at the time.
Now, real quick, Steven, do you mind following up with that? there's an expression I won't use, but you're no one's swinging off your nuts. I'll put it that way. But was there a guy or any series of guys? I played with a dozen NFL Hall of Famers, and I have no problem because he became a friend. Reggie White is one of the first guys, and Steve Largent being another. Were there any guys that when you're out there on the field and he's on second base and you go, holy cow, that's Pete, or that's name some of the other.
Yeah.
There's Barry Bonds or his father. Who are some of the guys that, especially early up in the '82 era, when you first got there, they were going, I can't believe I'm on the same field with this guy. I've watched him on TV my whole life.
Yeah, exactly. Reggie Jackson was definitely one. Early, like in spring training when I was young, my first hit was off Ferguson Jenkins, playing against Pete Rose in spring training.
Wow. Yeah.
Seaver.
Carl Yastrzemski, I think I played against. Seaver, I know I faced Seaver. Guys like that.
Was Nolan still in the league? Did you play against Nolan?
Yeah, I played with Nolan at Houston. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Played with Nolan.
I had a friend of mine that said that when he was warming up, he'd throw so hard that he'd have a little bit of a noise.
Yeah. He would grunt. An interesting story about Nolan. One night in Houston, he threw I think it was a 2-hit shutout, struck out 15. After the game, went in, iced his arm, met with reporters, and then I saw him. We had a ramp just outside the clubhouse. There was a ramp, and he was running up the ramp. He probably did, I don't know, 10, 15 sprints up the ramp. After all, 15 strikeout, 2-hit shutout, icing his arm, then did that.
He was a leg guy. He believed heavily in keeping his legs in great shape. He felt that that's the way I threw better because I threw with my legs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's strong foundation. Yeah, you
yeah.
Bet. But yeah, he was playing with him was really something special.
And did you play against him? Did you ever have to bat against him? And then now you're in the same clubhouse with him and going, you have no idea how hard it was to go against you.
Yeah. We played against him. I'm trying to think if I faced him or not. I can't recall if I faced him. I'd have to go back and.
Yeah, he was in Houston in the National League your whole career until you were a teammate. So unless it was the spring training.
He was at the Rangers. Yeah, he was at the Rangers.
Well, that was later, bud.
Yeah, he was with the Rangers before Houston. He might have gone back to the Rangers.
Yes, as a matter of fact, and he got his 5,000th career strikeout getting back to Redwood High School. His catcher was another Redwood player, Chad Kruder. And that was the man who caught his 5. You're right. He was with Texas when you were with Kansas City. I stand corrected.
Yeah,
but I
was going to say, Steve, he was the most cordial superstar I ever played against or played with or against. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to get into your zone training, and so the way I want to get started on this is a couple of years back, I think I had a barbecue at my house and a bunch of us were up there. I think we were watching the All-Star game and you were talking about the zone and we were talking about the World Series. And I mentioned that I had pitched a college game against our old high school coach, Al Endress, where I threw a shutout for the University of Nevada against the year he was pitching at Santa Clara. And I said, buddy, you had the World Series. That was my World Series. But more to the point, that day was one of those days where I was in the zone where it was as if I could just throw my glove out on the mound and the ball would be right where I wanted it to be. And it was just a flow. And I was reading some of what you sent us and I was looking at your website. And one thing that occurred to me when you were talking about percentages of pitchers and athletes who experience fewer injuries and things of that nature, it almost occurs to me, and I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but it almost sounds like people who are relaxed in a car accident and they're less likely to be injured and your body is loose and fluid. And as opposed to tense. And Harper, you played in the NFL, you know that if you're going up against these linemen and you're thinking about it, that's the way you're going to get injured. But if you're just into the play, into the flow, into the hole, making your blocks. Am I making any sense at all with this analogy or not?
Yeah, 100%. There's more to it than just being relaxed. It's accessing an alpha theta brainwave state. So yes, relaxation, as the mind sinks down to a deeper, quieter state, and you start to generate intention from that deeper level. There's less resistance in your ability to achieve your desire, and all the muscles start to fire in a synchronistic, harmonious, sequential manner. So there's less tug of war. So there's much less fatigue, and you're better able to command the body, control the body. Ball comes, if a pitch of the ball comes out of the hand, if you're in the right state, literally perfectly. That feeling when it's not too tight. Same thing as a long snapper, Harper. The feeling when it might be too tight versus too loose, and boy, it's just that sweet spot where you just know you're accessing it. And it's inside job. It's the great Roger Federer was asked, how he gets in the zone. He says, "Well, I play my best tennis when I forget I'm in a point." Well, I'm not so sure he forgets he's in a point, but he knows there's something else taking place that's causing him, that he's more interested in that moment. And then he goes on to say the game is within, which he's right. And then he makes a very extreme statement, but he's right. Anytime you think the game is between you and your opponent, you're beat. Really emphasizing what an inside job it is. And I'm, all my clients, every day I'm telling them you have to be more interested in your inner state. We teach them how to access that inner state over time. You have to be more interested in your inner state than anything else. If you're more interested in the mechanic, if you're more interested in the result, the muscles won't fire in a synchronistic manner. Information will get held up in the front of the brain. You're not able to access the motion, which is stored in the middle of the brain, and you're not able to get the information back to the cerebellum, which allows all the muscles to fire synchronistically, which was taking place when Harper was snapping the ball perfectly, which I know he did his whole career. To spend 11 years as a long snapper, you didn't have many that you snapped over the guy's head, right, Harper?
Well, I had a few. I had one that was led to a touchdown. Then I had one that led to a field goal, and then one to a safety. And then my dad said to me, he goes, "Well, at least you're going in the right direction." So, But you mentioned something a little while ago about being in the locker room about 20 minutes before introductions, and that was your first experience with this. One, I've always taught you can't teach what you don't know. So you didn't know, am I saying this correctly, that you didn't know what was going on, but you learned to snap out of it and to be able to have one of the best series that you can ever recall. What from that experience led to you wanting to know more about the relationship between how people think and how the brain naturally works, and tying those two together into producing a better athlete?
Yeah, well, what led to it was 20 months after the World Series, I was out of the major leagues because I didn't know how to repeat what it was that I had experienced in the World Series.
Is it repeatable?
The 100% it's repeatable.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And you almost want to repeat it. You want to know when you're in it and when you're out of your zone. Is that fair?
100%. Yeah, you just have to train, right? So what was happening in that moment for me was the neural pathways in my brain were by chance just clicking in a way that allowed all the muscles to fire synchronistically. There was no unnecessary movement. Felt like I had more time to respond to pitches. Balls hitting me right in the sweet spot. Balls coming out of my hand just perfectly.
Right.
And it's all because of how it's, a huge part, is how information is moving through the brain. Of course, the emotional body comes into play as well. Your emotions will undermine brain functioning. And so, what really allowed me to access the zone was working through the fear that I was feeling sitting at that locker when I said, "Oh my, this is really scary," as opposed to getting up and making myself a sandwich. Because when you make yourself a sandwich, you're not dealing with the emotions, you're just mood altering. And, you just are suppressing that energy, and that energy clogs you up, and the brain won't function as well. Well, the brain is the operating system of the muscles. The brain is the operating system of your whole life. It's the operating system of the muscles. If it's not your priority when you're training or playing, then you're living in the land of hope versus living in the land of science, right? And where you utilize physics-based mechanics and you utilize proper brain functioning and emotional processing, you can be pretty damn good every day.
Yeah. there's a science, as you mentioned, and with neurons and all of the other breakdown of that, but it's an art, I would imagine, as well, because my situation might be different from Steven's, which is uniquely different from you. We may all be on the same field together playing, but have different functions within. So is there a portion of that that's a part of the process too?
Everybody, the brain body connection works the same way for all humans. Now,
Okay.
it doesn't mean that we all can't have different blocks in our system, right? We could have a block from, I deal with this every day. A father, whose son went 0 for 4, and father says, what happened today? And so that alone can create a block that starts to, belief systems can be formed at an early age. I'm often telling this story to parents. I end up speaking to parents a lot, working with them. I often tell parents that, think about when, or imagine if you had a 10-month-old or an 11-month-old baby on the, sitting up, and you start to roll the baby the ball, and the baby catches the ball, and you clap, right? Great job. You smile, and then you roll the ball to the baby, and the baby misses the ball, and you go, oh, like that. Right there, you're forming a belief that mom or dad approves of me if I catch the ball.
Yep.
So beliefs start to get formed at an early age. That's why parents should really just sit back and just watch the game, and not necessarily applaud when someone does something well. And it's much easier, for those players that are not trying to please anybody else. There's immense freedom to allow their full ability to surface.
And I would imagine overcoming something. And real quick, I'm sorry, Steven, please forgive me. Buddy Curry, a former football player here in Atlanta, Kids and Pros is the name of his organization that he does now, where he teaches youngsters. And Steven, you've already heard this, so please forgive me. But for our audience and Buddy, this will be the first time. Steve, I said to Buddy, tell me a little bit more about, the relationship that you have with the kids and parents and all that. And he goes, Harper, what's the number one reason that kids quit and don't play sports, get at a different level, and they don't want to do it anymore? And I said, well, it might be injuries. I might be, coaches. It could be what. He goes, no, it's the car ride home. And that, I'm sure that that there's a positive and or negative effect that can occur during that. How do you overcome that if you had a bad car ride home with mom or dad, but you still want to play? There's a way out of that, isn't there?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it just takes work. It's restructuring the belief, right? Underneath any negative emotion is a belief, and and in those moments when the negative belief is there, we're just not in touch with who we really are. When we really know who we really are, the fear can't enter.
Yeah.
But that's part of the human journey, and so. But that's all. Oh yeah, that's all teachable. And the really cool thing about when I started doing this 18 years ago, Harper, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew it worked. And then I started doing research and talking to neuroscientists and seeing amazing results in 6 studies / research projects. The training it's amazing what happens, not just on the field, but off the field as well, in relationships and in the classroom. I can tell you, I've never worked one-on-one with a student athlete who hasn't done better in the classroom. Yeah. So it's just, again, the brain is the operating system. That's where you want to start. You want to when you're building a building, if the foundation's not strong, the 100th story can't be strong. It had no chance. There is no chance. If the foundation's strong, then it has a chance. So really helping solidify that foundation, the brain processes, the emotional processes, then it's crazy what happens.
I can imagine the amount of the light bulb going off in your head when you first heard about this type of very specific brain functionality and how you can apply that to sports. Do you mind me asking, where do you think you are personally in terms of the level of expertise and knowledge that you have? Are you still in the top of the first? Is this the bottom of the 8th? Learning more about the brain. Everybody wants to know more about how it works. I don't think we know enough, but where do you feel that you are in terms of your specific training and what you've learned and how you're able to enhance your knowledge?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer you completely honestly, of course.
I don't know.
No one knows what they don't know, including me.
Yep.
That being said, it's amazing what we know and what we do and how we do it. I'll leave it. It's really, really,
Okay.
really, really powerful.
My
And every
follow-up,
athlete. Yeah.
my
Go ahead.
follow-up with that very quickly would be, buddy. Yes, I understand. We don't know what we don't know. We're still learning all the time. But I would imagine, as with any science, at first it may be, hey, this is the way it's going to be. But then someone else might find, no, it's really not that way. 2 + 2 is 4. It's not 7. And so the science is changing and altering as we learn new things. Would you agree with that?
100%. But
Okay.
we're dealing with 4 areas. We're dealing with the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. Right? Those are 4 areas. And when you address all 4 of those, that's complete.
Yes.
That's complete. Now, there are different ways to address all of those, and to get to help someone evolve in all of those areas. And the spiritual one is, when the spiritual one is taken care of, then fear can't enter the system.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't enter the systems from time to time for all of us humans. It can, right? But we want to be able to transmute that energy.
And would it be fair to say that when it does come in, you learn to recognize it more easily and kick it out and say, no, that's not what's going to inhibit me anymore?
Exactly right. It's the awareness. Okay. Everything starts with awareness, right? Awareness, acceptance. I call it awareness, acceptance, detachment.
Bud, you mentioned earlier that basically the game is won before it's played. I don't know if it's exactly what you said, but it was something along. It occurs to me that what we're talking about here is somewhere between Sun Tzu and Yogi Berra, who said baseball is 90% mental and the other half is physical. And I can remember coming in. This didn't happen so much as a starter. As a starter, it's a different preparation. But I can remember coming in as a closer because I've done my share of relief pitching. And you're talking about 9th inning, 1 out, 2 outs, winning runs on second or third. You got to get it done. This is it. And I can remember not having muscle memory, like going into my motion and not knowing how to pitch and almost closing my eyes and going, okay, you know how to do this. Relax. This is your muscle memory. And feeling like I'm almost like pitching batting practice, like I'm not lifting my leg as high as usual. I'm not doing the usual push off. Maybe my release seems like isn't where it should be, but just letting it flow. And normally I would have success in those situations, just letting the muscle memory take over. Yeah. What does that sound like to you?
Yeah, well, it sounds like you were able to accept how you felt in that moment. You knew you weren't
exactly. Yeah.
You weren't feeling how you'd like to feel, but what you did was you accepted how you did feel, and so you were able to still compete. And that's critical, because it's very often that we as humans can, when we know we're a little off center, to kind of like be concerned about it instead of just accepting it, And that's what I was able to do at my locker that day. I just accepted that I'm freaked out about.
Yeah, that's when you mentioned that story, that reminded me of these feelings that I've had, and where you just enter the game and you know how to do it. You've done it a million times. You've practiced it, and it's usually only a few pitches before you get into the flow of things.
Yeah, right.
And yet you deliver it up there and it's like, hey, it's almost like, Bull Durham. Hey, that was a humdinger, you end up throwing a nice pitch, not even, how did I do that type of thing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. Harper, how did you feel like when you knew that you guys were going to punt or kick? You did field goal snapping too?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So, in big situations where, whatever, you're snapping into your own end zone on the end of the back end of the goal line, end zone, I should say, or a big field goal. How did you deal with all that in your career? Obviously pretty well, but.
First and foremost, thank you for your patience, for being able to listen to all the numerous stories that you obviously hear from different players. I would practice with my eyes closed, and I would I would be able, I could tell, and I associate it with the end of Star Wars, the first one, when Luke was told, "Let the Force be with you," and he takes the machine and he just fires that one death ray into the star. He just knew what to do. I knew that if I was high or low, I could tell the punter before he told me that ball was high, that ball was low. So I just got used to my forearms hitting a spot and knowing where the ball would be as a result of that. Does that make sense the way I express that?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you were on the sidelines prior to taking the field, how did you feel?
I'd grab a ball, and when it was third down, I'd watch the play. And if I knew if it was an incomplete pass, I'd snap a ball into the wall or into a net or something, just so that I had that one little extra bit of, I just did it, and I'm going to do it again in 25 seconds as the clock is ticking down. Only on this one, as soon as I'm done, I got to get up and block a guy for real. So you can't simulate that yet. But everything else prior to that, yeah, that worked for me.
And then are there rules in place in the NFL to where they can't knock you down? Is that my understanding or not?
Not then. They did have a rule that was put in place afterwards, but the basic rule was the umpires would and the umpire, excuse me, for our game is the guy that's in front of the center. Whoever the center is, he's usually on the other side of the linebacker. Right. The referee is always behind the quarterback. So the umpire would be the one, hey, stay off the quarterback or stay off the center's head. That's about the only thing during my era that they would say. Now you can't touch the center until after he's up. He's upside down. He snaps the ball, and then when he looks up and gets his hands up, now he's fair game.
Do you ever remember getting hit on the football field hard?
No, I can't remember getting hit hard enough to where I can't remember it. But yes, a few concussions, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep. Bubba Paris, do you remember him for the 49ers?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, we're huge 49er fans out here for sure. Number 66, I think.
My first home game in Seattle, we score. And this is the George Seifert year. So they had just won the Super Bowl, and they're going to win it again. And we scored, Seahawks. And for whatever reason, Bubba was lined up right over me on the extra point. Set hut, I snap, I'm up, and next thing I know, I can't control it, and I'm on my back, and Bubba lands right on top of me, and we're face to face. And Bubba was not a handsome man, all right? And he did not have great breath. He did it again. The third time we scored, he puts me right on my, I try to get underneath him, and he gets on top of me. Our face masks are touching each other. And I said, Bubba, we have to stop meeting like this. And he laughed just a little bit. I got him at least a giggle. And then he didn't knock me over any other time during that game. So that's my Bubba Paris.
I love it. Yeah. He's a good player. Yeah. That's a great story.
Yep.
Oh, 77.
Well, thank you, Logan. Thanks a lot. Now
wait, I got to hats off to Logan, man. Logan is doing an amazing job.
No kidding.
He's all over it, isn't he?
Yeah. He's got blondes or brunettes from the very beginning, and then he's got that belly. He can't get any closer than a guy touching you the way he was. It was disgusting. Yeah, right. But
speaking of Logan, he really handled. I talked about Bo Belinsky a couple weeks ago, so he handled the photos of Bo Belinsky with Anne Margaret and Tina Louise and all these women in the 60s. It was beautiful.
If you wait about 30 seconds, they'll probably bring him back up so I can see him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you can go back, and I think it was March 27th. I think was
Logan. What's taking you so long? They should be up there right now.
Well, you can go back and look at that one, buddy. The March 27th episode of Take 5 with Steven Travers.
Okay.
Hey, cool. Buddy, how quick did Steven get upset when he says, "I gave you a book. I've given you a book"?
Oh yeah. No, he jumped on that because he didn't hear me say it. He went in defense mode there, Harper, really fast. But no, he gave me a couple of his books.
Now what we don't know is whether or not you've actually read them. We're going to work on that one next.
I think I've looked through some. Yeah, I've looked through some. No, Steve's an amazing writer, man. What a historian. Steve, it's great that you're doing this right now because you have a wealth of knowledge about a wealth of not just sports, but history. And it's really great. And Harper, you as well. I mean, great questions. You guys are great.
Well, the guy to thank is really the founder of this show, Vincent Turner, and he has a partner. I can't remember his name, but Vincent is not with us on this show today, but it's just really his show. And he has been a fan of mine ever since I wrote a book about one night, two teams, Alabama versus USC, and the game that changed a nation. And then so he invited me on almost a year ago, and shortly thereafter, it just became a weekly thing. So I'm really just pleased as punch to be doing this. I tried to do a podcast YouTube show a couple of years back and did do a fantastic interview with Frank Froney and Dave Weatherman at the College World Series. And we're going to play that in about a month as sort of a lead in. We're going to do sort of a College World Series special.
Nice.
But that show, I had difficulties editing it. So I didn't have Logan. Logan is doing all this wonderful tech work that I wasn't able to do.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Buddy, what was it like for you with getting interviewed? You mentioned that time when your phone is ringing off the hook and all like that. There was a separation, and probably still is with most athletes. However, there's a few nowadays that want to brand it and take advantage in NIL, the whole thing right there. Any regrets that you didn't do a bigger, better job of branding yourself and the name and everything that you were able to ride along on that wave with the major leagues?
I don't think so. My real purpose in life is kind of really is what I'm doing now, So at the time it was, again, I just wasn't that interested in it. I was just playing a game I loved and wanted to do well. And I wasn't focused on the money. I wasn't focused on the fame. So it was never really at the top of my list. It didn't interest me. Maybe I should have done more with it. I don't know. But, when you have that experience in the World Series, Harper, you have no idea what happened. Okay, right? No idea. You play the best baseball of your life on the biggest stage. The world sees it. The world likes you, as they liked me. I'm on Letterman. I'm on the Today Show. I'm on magazine covers. I'm all kinds of commercials in Kansas City, and you have no idea how it happened, how you played so well. And so you go back to spring training, the subsequent anxiety I felt of trying to repeat it. And I felt like so many eyes were on me, you just don't know how it all happened. You have no idea how it all happened.
And that was a unique and different pressure for you, wasn't it, than what previously? Now you're world champion. You got a ring, you get the ceremony and all that. Now I got to do it again. What was that like for you?
Very difficult. The expectations that I felt were placed upon me, the expectations I had of myself, if not, again, when an athlete's in the zone, if I ask you, most athletes, most hitters, most golfers, if you ask them if they're playing, if they're not playing well, and you ask them, tell me, what's happening, what's wrong with you right now? You might say, well, I'm pulling off the ball, or, pulling my head, or I'm not getting my elbow in the slot, or whatever. I'm coming across the ball. They can tell you. But if you ask them when they're playing lights out, and you ask them, tell me what's happening, what's allowing you to play so well, the only thing they may say in golf, they may say, I'm just striping the ball well. I feel very quiet. Baseball, they'll say, things are slowing down. I'm not thinking. They don't understand the dynamics, the intricacies that are taking place in the physiology that are allowing all of that to happen,
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me. I didn't know what happened. And so trying to repeat it, the pressure of trying to repeat something you have no idea how it happened, it was very difficult.
Yeah. I would imagine on a negative aspect, the first thing I think of is rock and rollers. So, hey, I got to go out and do another show like that. Well, I don't have the same thing. So I need to take something. I need to amp myself up. And next thing you know, they're addicted to whatever. And that doesn't just happen in the rock and roll world. I understand that. I'm saying amphetamines or beer or whatever it is, PEDs that you would have in the professional world that try to get you to recall that. And I'm going to answer this question that I'm asking myself, knowing the answer, is you're trying to get something to repeat itself, but you don't know how. You're teaching people how to be able to repeat that. Is that correct?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
And we've proven it all through science, through research, that expedites development, enhances performance, and minimizes soft tissue injuries, which is a big issue in baseball right now.
And it would be fair to say, let's stick with the rock world. I may not get the same solo in night 2 in Detroit that I did in night 1, but I can certainly get myself to where I could be able to do that. I'm not going to guarantee that you're going to go 3 for 5, but I'm going to get you in a position where you see the ball, where you can react to the ball and relax to the point where you can hit it just like you did yesterday when you went 3 for 5.
Exactly right. I tell the story that I might get a couple hits one night for the Royals, and I go home, I'm feeling good. I got a couple hits. I wake up feeling good. And I drive to the ballpark and I say, okay, I'm going to make sure I put on my right sock before my left. I'm going to put on my Lucky Springsteen t-shirt. Yes. I'm going to take my 10 off the tee, my front toss, my BP, and I'm just going to hope. So I'm going to hope that I can play as well tonight as I played last night without understanding at the most fundamental level, which is the brain, what happened last night that allowed me to experience everything slowing down, not thinking, and with fluid, effortless motion. So what happens through the process is confidence becomes sustainable. It's not that you're going to hit 1,000, but you're going to know how to hit 1,000. Well, that's great. When you know how to hit 1,000, that's a huge relief, right? Instead of just like, oh, I had a good outing last time. I hope I can pitch well again this week. No, you're living in the land of hope. We don't want hope to be a strategy.
Yeah, and I could have used you in the second half of the
I could have used me. Okay, first of all, I'm gonna take care of myself. I could have used me before you. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I could have used someone. My first year at the University of Nevada, I had an outstanding year and a really good summer and a great fall, and started off the next year. This is my draft year, 6-1, 1.90, and then I don't know whether it got into my head. I know I wasn't hurt, but maybe I'm thinking about the draft or how much money I'm going to get, but something happened and I faltered down the stretch, and I'm just not sure what exactly happened, but I wasn't able to get into that zone that I had been in. And that was a very difficult time. I wish I could have figured out how to get myself back into it. But another thing that I saw in your reading through your website, you were talking about reducing injuries, and Harper had alluded to, or actually you buddy, made a mention of this. This is absolutely key. If we're talking about, and I talked earlier about being relaxed in a car accident, which is an extreme case, but if we're talking about some way to reduce injuries, particularly with pitchers, that is absolutely of amazing value to baseball.
You're right. I'm not sure baseball wants it.
Well, it's funny. I was reading an article about their Webb. They've decided he's getting the most innings of anybody, and the Giants are reverting to like a 1980s style, and they're using their pitchers more innings. They're not getting them out of there with the pitch counts, and
exactly,
so it's working.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought there, but
well, baseball didn't want what you were walking. You had a couple of comments on that.
I was going to say that baseball and really all sports understand more about good physics-based mechanics. And when they've gone to teach them, let's just talk about pitching for now. They understand pitching mechanics better than ever. Okay. And as they've gone, you would think that as they've gone to teach them, which is important, it's very, it's important to teach good mechanics, right? And as they've gone to teach them, you would think that injuries there'd be a decline, right?
Yeah.
Injuries have increased.
Right.
And the reason is they don't understand brain functioning. And so they go to teach the mechanic's the priority. Anytime the mechanic is the priority, which it's important, don't get me wrong, it is important. But anytime it becomes the priority or the desired result becomes the priority, right? That's a problem. The muscles don't fire synchronistically, which is why Harper talked about, I could just kind of feel it. I felt that in my forearm, and I did that one in the net or the wall, he said. In my hand, I got it. But he was more interested in his internal state there than making a good snap. And so really getting to know the intricacies. It's not enough to be great. Aaron Judge is great. He gets in the postseason, he falters. Clayton Kershaw is great. Gets in the postseason, he falters. Barry Bonds, A-Rod, Prince Field are all great players. Got in the postseason. Barry and A-Rod eventually broke through. Prince Fielder never broke through. But in general, Barry and A-Rod, they struggled early on because it's not enough to be good. You have to understand how the system works so that you can access it, so you can build and strengthen and maintain the neural pathways that allow you to function at the level that, that we can all function at when we're functioning there.
But if we're, I want to be candid, but not offensive. So are we more fragile as more specific? No, I need to get my spin rate or whatever. Or have we become, you mentioned Nolan Ryan running the sprints afterwards. I get that. I know coaches from football, for example, power cleans, bench press, and deadlifts. That's all we need. Well, now we're doing muscle-specific exercises, and yet you have more knee injuries and ankle issues and pulled hamstrings than ever before. Are we more fragile because of this technology, or is it more brain related?
Well, it's definitely brain related. That's a huge part. I mean, if the brain is not the priority, if those neural pathways are not, conditioned to allow all the muscles to fire synchronistically, which is very rare to find, that's a problem. And when it comes to the weight training and all of that, it's beyond my area of expertise. But I do know, in speaking to, I spoke to a doctor several months ago. I was at a party and I spoke to a doctor, and we were kind of discussing a lot of this, and he was saying that, these players who rehab from an injury are working so hard at strengthening the injured area that the opposite side becomes a problem, and they keep re-injuring themselves.
Okay.
And so, but that's really that part of it, Harper, is beyond my area of expertise, so I don't want to really comment too much on it. But I know, all the pulled leg muscles and all of that. If the brain is in the proper state, all of that is reduced, and certainly the torn ligaments, the UCLs, and all that. We've had amazing success at keeping pitchers free of injury. We've done the study at the American Sports Medicine Institute that was very successful, hope we've got some more avenues that we're moving towards on that.
Okay. Well, and then it's a continually developing situation where we learn more today than we knew yesterday, and tomorrow even more ahead of that. That's where when I was asking earlier about, are we in the top of the first inning or the bottom of the eighth? I get you said I can't really answer that, and that's a fair answer. Because
I can tell you that I'm going to ask you to clarify your question a little bit.
Okay.
Go back to that question.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to answer it before I even ask, because someone once said, we know more now than we've ever known about the brain. However, we still don't know so much that we can't even evaluate what more that there is to learn, because there's so much worse. It's almost like you're right in the middle of the question. Does that make sense?
That's good. Yeah, that's helpful. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know everything about the brain, and that I even know that much. I know how to train an athlete who has good mechanics to really allow him to access those good mechanics on a consistent basis, so that he's able to perform, up to his full ability.
Yeah, it's fair that you would say, I'm also going to teach you how to maximize it, because if you don't, a weightlifter, how can you lift 105% of what you've ever lifted before? You've never lifted, 100% is all you can do. Well, guess what? We can train you so that you're a little bit stronger, a little bit quicker and faster, and you can get 105% or 107. That's how records are broken. Your job is to help, your function and part of your job is to help others reach that maximum. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Stephen, I interrupted you. I know you had another question.
Oh, well, I just, and maybe Logan, you can help out here. Buddy, are there any events that you have coming up that you want to talk about? And also, can you, again, tell us where we can find you, your website? Also, tell us the name of your book. I know you have a book out. Hopefully, Logan can find that, put that out. And so why don't you tell us, what you've got going, what your website is, and what your book is.
Sure. No upcoming events. but I've actually got a clinic in California. But other than that, zonemotion.com. I can be reached through zonemotion.com. And what else do you want to know, Steve?
You had a book that came out.
Oh, yeah. Seven Secrets of World-Class Athletes. I co-authored with Stephen Yellen. And I've got an upcoming book. We're not quite sure when we're going to release it yet, but The Art of the Zone is upcoming. So the book is written. Going to do a little. Yes, Logan's all over it, man.
Steve, Bud Biancalana.
Yeah.
Hey, but if you don't mind me asking, buddy, what would a parent or an athlete himself look forward to visiting with you with if they get a hold of you either through a phone number or your website or an email address? What's the process like for you in terms of how you get to meet people? And I would imagine anywhere across the country and the globe is now available. However, you're only in one place at one time.
Yeah, I do a lot of work on the internet. FaceTime or Zoom is not a problem at all. I do most of my work on there. I do have in-person clients who come and spend time in Kansas City with me. So we do an initial call with the family, kind of understand what their challenges are. And then, I always want to speak to the athlete. Typically parents will reach out to, of youth will reach out to me, or an agent will reach out to me of a professional player. But I always want to speak to the athlete and just make sure that, what I'm saying resonates, which it typically does. I think really any athlete at a high level understands, when we talk about experiencing the game is slowing down and not thinking in fluid, effortless motion. And then, so just making sure that all resonates and then see, we go from there, working with them on the field initially, and then on the field and off the field both. It's when you're building neural pathways, you've got to make sure that you're strengthening them on a regular basis, because they're either weakening or strengthening on a regular basis. And so we always want to be strengthening and maintaining them. So it's a big part of what we do. Do
I have to be in a horizontal position making a great catch in order to be able to visit with you, or can I just be kind of more vertical?
I only accept players that played 11 years in the NFL and only had 2 or 3 bad snaps.
Well, I was upside down on my back with Bubba around there, so maybe if somebody took a picture,
you get an exemption.
That might get me in, I would hope.
Yeah.
And so the process itself to get in touch with you about, especially, I'm talking about real serious high-end athletes that are realizing there's a calling on me to do this. And there's stuff that we've mentioned today that, again, people aren't even thinking about it because they don't know anything about it. What part of this is education for you in terms of just, look, I'm going to give you the A, B's, and C's, and then we're going to work on some of the more specific things to how I can help Steven specifically?
Yeah, exactly. Just a conversation and to give them an overview of what it looks like, because it's what probably the most challenging thing of what I do, Harper, is to get someone to understand what it is I do. Because when an athlete's in the zone, it's a very abstract experience. They just don't know what's taking place. And so it's very challenging for someone to grasp it. But once they start to experience, they're like, oh, I get it. And, they're sold. It's, for any athlete, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, but any athlete who's listening to this, if you guys want to play at a high level, you're looking for a scholarship, you definitely want to go through this training.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be.
That's not a sales pitch. That is the absolute truth, and they know it. They'll know it, and everyone's happy.
Well, that's part of the reason you get to be good, is that you can repeat it and you can control it in some respects. And I imagine those are the two. That's part of science, right? It has to be measurable and repeatable for it to be science in the first place.
Right. Exactly. 100%.
Well, this has been fascinating. Anything else, Steven? What am I missing? This has been a great conversation, obviously.
Well, I knew it would be. And, we talked to Bruce McGowan last week, and he referred to you, Bud, in that conversation as a cerebral athlete. And I think that has been demonstrably proven today. And you always have been since the first time I knew you. You were a thinking ball player. Really, that was what made those high school teams great. We were all hardworking kids who loved baseball, and we were smart. We were smart kids. We thought we understood the game. We understood the lessons that Al Andrus taught us, and took it to the rest of our lives. And so I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on this program. It's just fabulous to every time I reconnect with you. I just always feel reinvigorated, and just again, thank you
Likewise.
very much.
Love your knowledge, Steve. You've written 29 books.
29, 30.
Amazing historian, great memory. And Harper, really great job. Nice to meet you, and I loved your questions, and you guys were awesome.
Well, thank you very much. And, did you see the shrug, Stephen? Yeah, 30, 33, whatever, we'll get it right one of these days. And did he ever autograph a book for you? Did he say,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
Does
he
he?
did.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
This whole conversation has been, and for those that are listening, we spent about the first hour, 15 minutes, give or take, going over Buddy and his career. But also, if you have an aspiring athlete or know somebody that can take advantage of learning how to think better, how to react better, and how to perform in a repeatable manner, then you definitely want to go to zonemotion.com. There's information there that will be applicable to what you're trying to do. Not only just basic information, but then how you can get a hold of Buddy himself and go to further training if that is your desire. I appreciate that. Anything I'm missing there, Buddy?
No, you're great. Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much for you being a guest. A national champion in the high school level, a #1 draft pick, a World Series champion, and now a man that wants to create other champions with his quest for the rest of his life. That's Buddy Biancalana. And we are so gracious that he and Steven are good friends and that he came on for free, Steven. That was awesome, the way you pulled that off. But I'm Harper LaBelle saying thank you for tuning in to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is obviously Take 5 with Steven Travers. So thank you to Logan Landers, and we appreciate everyone being a part of today's show. Have a fantastic rest of your day.